Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining a little early. We will get started in just a minute. We'll give everyone a few more seconds to join and get situated, and then we will kick this webinar off right at the top of the hour. So thank you all again. We're excited to dig into some of this content with you. All right, well, it is 2 o'clock Eastern, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello again, and thank you for joining us today for this Ask the Experts webinar. I'm Allison Phillips, Director of Marketing here on Cox Media's corporate team, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Some quick housekeeping items before I introduce our guest expert. This presentation is being recorded. You'll receive an email with the recording so you can watch it again at your convenience or share with your teams if you'd like. We have about 45 minutes of great content for you and 15 minutes or so set aside for Q&A. If at any time during the presentation you have a question, go ahead and type it into the question box on your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So now that that's out of the way, I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest expert, Marissa Koslov. Marissa is the Vice President of Insider Intelligence at eMarketer, a market research company that provides insights and trends related to digital marketing, media, and commerce. Our teams here at Cox Media rely on eMarketer for many of the insights that help us build strategic campaigns alongside our clients and our agency partners. So we're excited to have Marissa here today. As Vice President, Marissa has extensive knowledge of the challenges and opportunities that businesses face in effectively reaching their target audiences and growing revenue. She has a proven track record of educating and building value among some of the world's largest and most recognizable brands, agencies, and ad tech companies. And she's also the host of eMarketer's Industry Voices video series and moderator of weekly Tech Talk webinars. Wow, Marissa, that's a lot. Outside of her sales and account management experience, Marissa is a certified Pilates instructor and has been teaching for more than 10 years. She lives in New York City with her husband and daughter. For today's conversation, Marissa is going to bring her unique expertise to the table and help us really unpack the key players and trends in the video advertising space. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Marissa.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Allison. And first, I just want to give a big thank you to you for the warm introduction, and especially to the whole Cox Media team for having me here today. So I'm thrilled that you're all here. You know, we have a great presentation ahead where we're going to be talking about our insider view for breaking down the video ecosystem, as Allison said, and how the key players stack up. So just so all of you know, I don't know if Allison mentioned this, but I have been with the company for 12 years. So I even think about my experience here and how the video ecosystem has shaped up in that time. I mean, what a world of difference when I started here in 2010. I mean, I didn't even have an iPhone. So the ways in which we watch content right now are nowhere near what they are today as, when I started. So a lot has happened over the past few years, and we're going to get into 5 key focuses today for different trends in the video space, focusing on TV, digital video, some of the new players in the market, and what opportunities lie ahead, and what are some of our predictions for the remainder of the year. Before we get started, I have to say we need to have a warning here. There are going to be a number of acronyms ahead. So let's just all get on the same page with some of the key terminology that's going to be used within this presentation. So the first one is TV. So this is TV as you know it from growing up, the traditional media, it's traditional TV devices, broadcast, cable networks programming, and viewership. So just think back to TV as you knew it from years ago, which is still TV today. When I talk about ad spending, that's going to focus on broadcast specifically and cable TV. This will exclude anything digital. OTT, which stands for over the top. This was also a question that came in advance, so thank you for asking for the definition of this. That is video that is delivered independently of any traditional pay TV service. It doesn't matter which device it's on. The next one is SVOD, subscription video on demand. So just think Netflix, something you are paying a subscription fee to view that content. On the flip side, AVOD, ad-supported video on demand. This is something like Peacock, which is NBC Universal's streaming service, fully ad-supported, or even some of the other streamers that do have ad-supported tiers like Hulu. And lastly, CTV, connected TV. This is video watched on a TV set connected to the internet or through a peripheral device, but it is directly connected to the internet, also a smart TV. The last thing I'll share before we get into the great content is that I will be using both eMarketer and Insider Intelligence interchangeably throughout the presentation, so please know that they are all the same company and within our world here. So let's get started because we have a lot to go through. So our first focus today is that advertising is going digital. And I'm going to start off with a quote from my dear friend and colleague here at Insider Intelligence, Paul Verna, the lead on our advertising and media desk. Paul's prediction for this year is that 2022 is going to be the year of digital advertising. And yes, you heard that right. So you're probably thinking, Marissa, what do you mean this is the year of digital advertising? Hasn't digital advertising been around for years at this point already? Well, yes, that is the case. But the reason here that we think that 2022 is going to be the year of digital advertising is because the numbers have exceeded our forecast again. And the areas in which they have is that by 2024, the market is going to be $88 billion larger than we actually expected it would be 2 years ago. So you'll see in this recent data from eMarketer, digital ad spending in 2022 is going to be $248 billion. That's going to go up to $362 billion by 2026. And digital is going to make up 80% of all ad spending. So a large portion of the dollars are headed towards digital. And the reason for that being is at this point, we can't ignore the economic factors that are happening right now in the world. There's a lot of uncertainty. And advertisers really are embracing a lot of the flexibility that digital offers. And it will help them adjust to long-term unpredictability without having to commit a lot upfront. They can kind of adjust and pivot as they choose. And what we saw was that in 2019, digital ad spending accounted for about 55-ish% of total media ad spending. Well, here's our prediction for where we see digital spending going next year. These are 2023 numbers. Digital is going to take about 75% share next year, which, as you can see, is a large portion of total media ad spending. That was a milestone that we anticipated reaching a few years ago. We anticipated getting to that point by 2025. So you'll notice that trend in a few other slides throughout the presentation where we've adjusted and updated our numbers based on all of the data that we see here from so many different sources of information. That allows us here to quickly pivot and adjust our forecasts in real time. So you all have access to information that is up to date and accurate to help make the best decisions for your business. And some of these areas have grown even beyond what we initially expected pre-pandemic, of course, but even during the pandemic, there are areas that we have adjusted as well. So we'll talk about some of those. So let's again look at some of the digital ad spending figures. Digital ad spending has rapidly recovered from the pandemic. I like to refer to 2020 as the year of doom and gloom. Like we all don't ever want to think about that year ever again. So after that uncertainty, digital is on the rise again. And you'll see that the number in 2021 was $211 billion. Well, to put that into context for you, last year's numbers we were anticipating at 77 billion, pre-pandemic. So those numbers blew our pre-pandemic forecast completely out of the water. And we are continuing to see growth into 342 billion come 2025. So which format do we all think is driving this growth in digital ad spending? Well, the chief format here is display. And here are our eMarketer numbers for display ad spending. That's going to take about $205 billion come 2025. This year is going to account for well over half of all digital ad spending. So that's at that 56.2% share right there. You'll see that that share is slowly going to go up to 60% come 2025. And we also know that the growth between that record-breaking year of 2021, the growth from 2021 to 2022 was about 20%, up to that $143 billion this year that we are estimating. And the areas in which are providing this large growth within display primarily is digital video. So that specifically is social video and also CTV. We're going to get into CTV a lot coming up in today's presentation. Those two together collectively will account for about 70% of total digital video spending specifically this year. So let's talk about that a little bit further. Video advertising is now the predominant form of display advertising for all but one industry. So I'd like you all to take a second and think about that. I'm going to ask for your opinion shortly, but before we get to that, video ads, let's talk about the chart and the data here. Video ads have long been on track to overtake the display format, and that pivot actually happened last year. So as recently as 2016, less than 30% of display ad spending went to video. So not a ton. This year, video will claim a 53.1% share, as you see on the left side of the chart right there. So let's now go back to that one industry that video is not the predominant form of display. So if you can, submit your answers in the questions section, and I can see what you all think, which industry is the one that's not really using display that much. So I don't know if I am seeing this in the questions here. So we will just continue to go ahead, and I will share that with you. So the main industry that is not using video as much as others is, drum roll please, the retail industry. Well, this may come as a surprise for many of you, really, because retail is the biggest spender of all in general, but they are the ones that are holding out favoring video. The reason for that being is that certain areas of retail, like apparel and furniture and appliances, these things don't really need to be in motion to be attractive. So think about, a stove maybe that you want to buy. That doesn't necessarily need to be on video. So therefore, retail has favored, in a lot of instances, more static imagery, but we will, as always, continue to track these developments here at Insider Intelligence and see how that progresses. And if retail does end up moving towards more video content in the next few years. So now moving into our next focus, let's talk about TV. So you're all sitting here today. You're thinking, well, aren't we here in a presentation from Cox Media? Like, what about the TV industry? I actually looked up a fact today. I was curious as to when the first TV broadcast was. Well, it was 95 years ago, almost to the day, actually. It was September 7th of 1927. So this medium has been around for almost 100 years now, and there's been so much talk about the future. What is happening with television? Is it going away? Are people cutting the cord? Are people spending more time with it? Where are people spending their dollars? Well, according to our analysts at Insider Intelligence, who look at data from all over the place, the death of TV has been greatly exaggerated. So let's talk about why that is. And I'll bring up a quote from, again, my friend Paul Verna here. He says that so far in 2022, U.S. TV advertising has been resilient to inflation, supply chain disruptions, global conflicts, stock market volatility. Well, those are some lucky things right there. The 30-second spot that has epitomized TV advertising are actually thriving thanks to the explosion of CTV viewing. So in that sense, TV advertising is actually not in decline, but simply in transition from traditional to digital distribution channels. So I love this particular quote from Paul because, it really speaks to really getting down to actually the facts of where people are spending their time, and are they spending it in almost more or less the same thing, but just a different shape and form. And despite the turbulence in the economy, which of course we can't ignore, there are definitely some factors that we are seeing here at Insider Intelligence, which have caused us not change our outlook on TV and the death being greatly exaggerated. So I actually did verify that with our team last week, knowing that I was going to bring all of this information to you, saying, is there anything else that we are predicting for the rest of the year? So the outlooks at this point are staying the same. And interestingly enough, if we look over the past few years, there were definitely some sectors that were hit very hard in the beginning of the pandemic. We can't ignore those. The travel industry, cinema, places people just were not going, and advertising took a big hit in those areas. These industries have now come back to their pre-pandemic levels. And the other industries that continue to advertise have offset those other hard-hit industries, such as financial services, insurance, healthcare. They really had helped to offset it. And now combining the two, now that they're all back to pre-pandemic levels, have been really great for television. Another interesting point about TV that I want to bring up is, we keep hearing so much talk around this cookieless future and these privacy issues. Well, TV has not been impacted by those privacy changes that some other companies have. So we know that, Meta as well as Snapchat have all really been impacted by the privacy changes, and those have been reflected in their earnings. So going back to this tried and true form could actually be beneficial because those privacy changes really are not in play with television. Also, the last trend that's helping to boost the TV industry is ad-supported tiers from companies like Disney Plus and Netflix. We know that Netflix just hired away from Snap 2 top executives to lead their new ad business at Netflix. So these have opportunity to really boost that CTV category. And as always, we are closely monitoring any changes that are happening in the market that may cause us to adjust any numbers in our forecast for the remainder of the year or 2023. Let's now look at our eMarketer numbers for traditional media ad spending by media. Well, TV here clearly taking the lion's share with $68.35 billion. That's accounting for almost 70% of overall traditional media ad spending. And the linear numbers are looking pretty good too. So U.S. linear TV ad spending is going to grow by 4.1% this year to $68.35 billion, which you saw in the previous chart. This will just give you a year-over-year comparison for where we see it. It may not look like much. We just saw a lot of those double-digit growth figures on the previous slides with digital. But this year is actually the second fastest growth rate in a decade, which was bested only by 2021 after that recovery from the pandemic when, it just totally gutted the spending. So why does TV continue to be so important as a part of the media mix? I'm now going to highlight a quote from Chuck Hengel, who is the CEO and founder of Marketing Architects. We interviewed Chuck for our Behind the Numbers podcast, which is a daily podcast that we have here. Highly recommend taking a listen. I listen every morning. And Chuck said historically, it's hard to find really great brands at large companies that didn't start their marketing efforts on television. Today, advertising on TV is as essential as ever in balance with digital. TV is still having large impacts for lots of brands. In fact, when you think about the major digital players like Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're all major players in advertising on TV, and they believe in it for their business. So now, I encourage you to all sort of think back to commercials that you saw maybe this morning or this week or whatever. But I can tell you that, in addition to just these players that you see here on the screen, I'm seeing a lot of the D2C businesses using TV right now. In fact, this morning when I walked into the office, I hear a TV in here when I come in, and there was a commercial from Chewy on in the background. We're seeing Peloton commercials. We're seeing meal subscription business commercials constantly. So these digital businesses, a lot of them being digital native, really value that reach of television that it can provide. And of course, there is a lot of buzz around streaming services. We're going to get into that shortly. But you'll see in this next chart from advertiser perceptions that even with all the streaming services in the market, many agency and marketing professionals are continuing to keep their TV spend intact. So take a look at the red portion of the chart as well as the black portion of the chart. This is either the areas they're increasing or staying the same. So that's very encouraging to know that the budget is not necessarily going away, but that TV in this case continues to be, and video, valuable mediums to reach those audiences. So collectively thinking about linear TV and CTV, this really is the full package when it comes to the opportunity around TV programming. And this is a chart that we have through 2026 looking at the share of both linear as well as CTV. And of course, despite their obvious differences, traditional and digital platforms kind of act more or less the same way when it comes to advertising. They mostly feature 30-second spots that brands have known for with brands that people have known for many years. So TV and video are doing very well right now, as the figures indicate here. And again, I'm bringing back Paul. He's like the star of the show here. A lot of streaming content is TV content. People are choosing to watch the same programming, but if they access it via a streaming service, they're not actually moving away from the content as much as changing how they access it. That was on our podcast over the summer. And, personally, as we get into some of the data now on time spent, I'll just give you a personal story. I mean, I have spent so much time with television my whole life. I love TV. I've always been so fascinated by it. I think when I was younger, I thought I would have a career in TV. I just have always loved it. I actually wasn't allowed to watch TV as a kid, so I'm probably boosting these time spent numbers big time. It was almost a punishment for us because my brother and I wanted to watch TV too much, so our parents said we could only watch it on the weekends. So now that I'm an adult, I feel like I, have the flexibility to watch it when I want. And here are some time spent with TV numbers here, which I am definitely contributing to, I will say. Time spent with TV among adults is very healthy. There's often a lot of talk about people spending more time with digital video. That change has not happened yet, and we don't foresee that happening until 2024. So if you look at the right side of the chart, you'll see that that's really where the change takes place, but it's only by a few minutes. And so both of these together still remain a really important part of the ecosystem. And let's now talk about the ad dollars. Where are these headed? Well, the upfronts, for anybody that, grew up in the TV business, of course, that the upfronts are like pretty much the Super Bowl when it comes to TV advertising. A lot of dollars are committed upfront for the entire year. So that's a big shift in how digital is bought, obviously. But upfront TV spending peaked in 2018, which is when also overall TV spending peaked. So after 2 years of the doom and gloom of the pandemic, we are seeing that upfront TV spending is right back at the pre-pandemic level. So if you look at the 19.18 number versus now that 2022 number of 19.21, we are back to where we were pre-pandemic in terms of the highs. According to MediaPost, so these numbers clearly were put out before the upfront. According to MediaPost, the numbers actually came in at 20.1 billion. So as it often happens, our numbers were almost right on the mark in terms of our predictions for where the spending would be. Here's another chart for linear programmatic TV ad spending. So that's more than doubled since 2019, and that's going to be at about 6.9 billion in 2022. That now accounts for just 1/10 of total linear TV ad spending. And to compare, just about 1/10 of digital video is purchased upfront. Most of it is actually purchased programmatically, which, as many of you know, happens just before the ad run, so versus being committed months upfront. And in regards to local TV, local share of TV ad spending is slightly increasing this year. So we are now in 2022, which is a year of midterm elections. So I'm sure all of you right now are seeing lots of political commercials on TV. I know I'm seeing it here for all of our New York City candidates. They're also texting me on the phone. I mean, it's like you're seeing it in many shapes and forms for their advertising. But in regards to local spending, this is a common occurrence for local advertising to boost up when there are elections happening. And the candidates spending heavily. So local has, on average, accounted for about 1/3 of total TV spending in most years. That share is slightly rising this year, and that's why local growth is higher than national TV ad spending this year for the growth percentages. So for a company like Cox Media, I think that has a lot of localized advertising opportunities. That's some great news right there, and some great data. Let's move now into our third focus, which is the digital video opportunities and the increase in digital video and what's happening in this space. First, I want to get into talking about the space as a whole. So here are the figures for share of the average time spent with media in the US. Well, digital in 2022 is going to be at about 62.4%. This is actually the highest that we have ever predicted, and that's going back to 2008 when we started to forecast this metric. That is going to continue growing, but we will see, of course, that the gains are starting to slow a little bit. And by 2024, we're going to see about 64.9, so let's call it 65%, compared to that traditional media number of about 35% right there. And we do know that with linear addressable, that is still growing, but the ceiling is limited. And I remember the first time that I heard about linear addressable, it almost blew my mind to think that my neighbor next door to me could be seeing a completely different ad than me based on preferences on TV. So that, to me, when I first heard about that years ago, was such a cool thing. But the number of TV addressable households is shrinking, and that's really due to cord cutting. So in the past few years, since 2019, roughly 9 million people have cut the cord and have canceled pay TV. But really where the dollars are headed in terms of the upfront is digital video is attracting a lot more. So nearly $10 billion is going to be spent on upfront digital video this year, and that's almost double what was spent in 2020, only 2 years ago. So according to some data that we have from iSpot, nearly 3 in 10 advertisers plan to allocate more than 20% of their upfront spending to digital platforms. And then according to this additional data, for 30% of respondents, so the first 2 bars that you see there, digital video will account for less than 1/10 of their upfront spending. So again, that's of course due to a lot of digital video being bought programmatically, but overall, more dollars are headed in this way towards digital video and being committed upfront than we have ever seen before. And I will also now bring another insider intelligence analyst into the mix now, Ross Benish, who is our senior analyst of digital media. Ross's prediction for earlier this year was that U.S. upfront CTV ad spending will exceed $6 billion this year. And Ross was certainly correct in his prediction because CTV was really the big winner for digital video at the upfront. And for the first time, CTV is going to account for more than U.S. upfront digital video ad spending this year. For context, that $6 billion was how much we thought the total CTV ad market was going to be in our first forecast ever, which was in 2019. So think about that was what was only at the upfront versus the entire year now. Total CTV ad spending in 2022 for the year is predicted to be at $18.89 billion, according to our forecast. Here in this chart, we have the upfront video spending, upfront CTV video spending, and also looking at definitely those percent changes, a lot of growth, of course, in 2021, double digits in 2022, as well as 2023. So it really is mirroring, what we thought was going to happen a number of years ago. Again, updating our forecast based on the knowledge that we have and the change in consumer behavior, as well as spending patterns from advertisers. And we saw some interesting things happen at the upfronts over the past few years. So some buys were specifically committed to linear, and some were specific to streaming platforms. Some had a combination of both, depending on the company and what the offering was. But some of the commitments were really independent. So last year, some of the independent ones were pretty significant. NBCU announced that Peacock had secured $500 million in upfront commitments. Roku doubled its upfront commitments from the year prior, and Vizio secured $100 million in upfront commitments as well. So just think about, thinking of, even though they're under one house, really focusing in on opportunities that are specific to those streaming platforms, especially the ones ad-supported as well. In regards to SVOD, subscription video on demand, that is, of course, on the rise, and the amount of services keeps growing that consumers have in their households. So I was actually thinking, I was going to poll all of you as to how many you have. So just maybe think about it in your head right now, because I don't know if I can see it in the chat. But I was thinking to myself, well, how many subscriptions do I even have in my own house? Sometimes you just lose track. So I actually asked my husband yesterday, and I said, besides this one, and this one, do we have anything else? And he brought forth another one, which I actually was unaware that we were subscribing to. So I'm just going to put some logos up on the screen to jog your memory. So please think about how many you all have. According to data from TiVo, U.S. consumers added 4.8 services over the last 5 years. So I guess I have 4 in my house, and then of course, the others that we may share, or that people may share with us. So according to also this data from Leachman Research, 83% of adults in the U.S. have some major subscription service. So that's a huge percentage of people that actually have any service in their house. So which platforms are attracting the majority of the upfront spending? So that's a good question. So let's look at this data that we have here from iSpot. Again, Hulu right now taking almost 80% share of upfront dollars. So 80% of respondents in this survey plan to allocate dollars to Hulu. The next 3 on the chart, Peacock, YouTube TV, as well as Roku, they're all more or less neck and neck. We shall say about 50% are planning to spend with those companies. And then also similarly, on the flip side of SVOD, AVOD is also growing as well. So why is this? So it's not, a backlash against SVOD, but it is just a realignment, as we say here on the slide here, of viewer preferences of choice, cost, content, also a subscription model. So there likely is going to be a pretty big combination that viewers will have of content that they specifically pay a subscription fee for, where they don't want ads, and then content that they're okay with having ads aligned with. So there's going to be a combination, and of course, content always plays a role in that, and where you can watch your shows, and really how targeted the ads are and how relevant they are. But the bottom line, I guess, is that connected TVs are really changing media consumption patterns. And I think we all can relate to this picture here on the screen because we've probably all been in this exact scenario. Maybe it's sports on your TV or maybe it's something else. But regardless, just having the big screen in your living room is something that people love. They love being around other people and watching shows, or even if you want to do it by yourself, just that feeling of just watching TV. So time spent with subscription OTT video is going to increase by 6.8%. That's going to add 6 minutes to reach 1 hour and 27 minutes per day. That's actually one of the fastest increases among any of the categories that we track. So we are going to continue to watch that. A really big opportunity that we see here is for those digital platforms and apps that really do mesh well with CTVs. That's including things like OTT subscription services, YouTube, digital audio. That's going to grow time spent faster than anything else this year. So just think about that as sort of a takeaway for this section. I'm going to round out this section with a really cool quote. So earlier, Allison mentioned that I host a CMO series called Industry Voices, where I speak with a number of industry leaders on challenges and opportunities. Well, I spoke with Isis Ruiz about a year ago. She's the former SVP and CMO for Norwegian Cruise Line. I also like this example because it's in the travel industry, which we know is hit really hard. So Isis talked a lot about their media mix and what they were testing and learning from in 2021. And she said they really paid attention to the shift in consumer behavior. We tested channels like online streaming. We had never done anything before on Hulu or Pandora. This is also in regards to their Break Free campaign. So many of you saw that on TV. I think I had that Queen song in my head for like the better part of 2021 from those commercials. But she says that there's a lot to like about these channels, and they've now become a hallmark of the campaign. People had a lot of time during the pandemic to really try some new streaming services that they had never done before. So they really took a look at what consumer behavior was showing and mirrored their campaign to really speak to what consumers were, where they were, and how to get in front of them. So really the combination for them, I think, of the linear TV, the broadcast TV, as well as digital elements were very successful for that Break Free campaign. And when we think about streaming services, let's now think about the big giant in the market and what is ahead for YouTube. So I was sharing earlier with Allison that we've seen data literally up to the minute this morning on what's been happening with YouTube. So I've woven that into the presentation today. YouTube is still the king of digital video, but they are facing some major competition in the market, and they have a whole host of new offerings now, which is great because they have to continue to differentiate themselves, focusing on things like creators and commerce and shorts, but their relevance isn't guaranteed, and we'll get into why that is in a second. I'm going to start off with a quote from the CEO of Google. This actually came just 2 weeks ago out of Code Conference. So if any of you were following Code Conference, there was a whole host of talk about TikTok and how TikTok pretty much came out of nowhere. So he says competition comes from nowhere. None of us were talking about TikTok 3 years ago. Totally agree with that one. I actually had a meeting with somebody at a conference from TikTok 3 years ago, actually in 2019. And I heard about it, but I was kind of, looking it up on my phone beforehand, the day before, prepping for the meeting. All of a sudden, 30 minutes go by, and I realized I've just been sitting there watching the videos. I had no idea. And now think about, where we are today. There's a lot of competition coming from a competitor that really was almost unheard of in this market. So YouTube and TikTok now, data that recently came out, are neck and neck in terms of average time spent with US adult users. So we see it more or less at that 45-ish minutes, right? 45.8, 45.6. Both are well ahead of other social platforms like Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, places where we've heard a lot of people spending time for so many years. Now TikTok has shot up to the top, really rivaling YouTube. But YouTube has some great numbers. So we're going to put these out right here. This is a cool graphic here combining a number of data points from a recent report we put out on YouTube. They're thriving, but their relevance among consumers as well as marketers just isn't guaranteed to last. TikTok definitely is a real threat. And YouTube will really need to continue to innovate and adapt and maintain user attention and also marketing dollars. So just some cool stats that I saw about YouTube is that their US user base is 25.5 times larger than TikTok's. So that offers marketers a massive reach. They also have a good hold among teens, so a very valuable demographic. We hear all this talk about Gen Z and getting in front of them. Well, according to data that I saw from Pew, 95% of teens said that they had ever used YouTube. So that's pretty much every teen has used YouTube, 95%. Per our estimates here at Insider Intelligence, we're estimating that 9 in 10 teen internet users will use YouTube on a monthly basis this year. That is well ahead of other platforms. For context, 6 in 10 on TikTok and Snapchat. So that's not to say that there are not major challenges ahead, even despite all of those great numbers. Let's look at some of those. So the first challenge for YouTube is that they missed their sales expectations from Wall Street by over $500 million. That was in Q1. Well, the Russia and Ukraine war played a factor in that one, but also things like Shorts also played a role. Shorts definitely has a growing audience, but at that point there were just a few monetization efforts. This is something that YouTube is working on, which we'll talk about in a second. Also, they haven't kept up really with the social commerce boom. So social commerce now is just such a big topic of conversation. We know that it was extremely popular in some other markets. As the rest of the social platforms really doubled down on these efforts or had been during the pandemic, YouTube had not been doing that as fast. They made fewer moves in the space. We also know that that market is shaking out a little bit. Instagram now has deprioritized its social commerce effort. So YouTube is going to have to do a lot more just to not necessarily copy TikTok. We know that TikTok replaced YouTube as the title sponsor in VidCon. YouTube had been a sponsor for years and years, but over the past few years, YouTube has taken that position right there. So they're going to have to do some other things besides copy TikTok. And another way that we expect the company to change moving forward is that Shorts is going to be more monetizable. So short form video is something that consumers have really gravitated to at this point. 25.3% of consumers have said that they prefer to watch short form videos on Shorts behind TikTok, which is at 48%, but definitely ahead of Instagram Reels, which was per some data from Inmar Intelligence from Q4 of last year. People definitely want more short form content, and recently YouTube announced some new ad and commerce tools for advertisers on Shorts. That was at an event that they hosted in May. So as Shorts grows in popularity, the advertising options will follow, as we've seen from many other platforms where they slowly start to gain popularity and an audience, and then the advertising comes. Just look at Facebook from years and years ago. TikTok and YouTube definitely continue to play sort of this back and forth game. And YouTube will definitely have to watch out for the competition, especially for short form video when it comes to TikTok. TikTok is looking to expand its presence in CTV, so that is something that will need to be kept keeping an eye on. And according to a new job posting, so that's something that we were sleuthing a little bit here, but also YouTube is bringing short form videos to TV. They're trying to capture more revenues. So we'll have to see how this all pans out in regards to video that is often optimized for the mobile phone. According to another member of our team here, Evelyn Mitchell, who's an analyst also on the advertising and media desk, she says changes to consumer behavior have already set in. Snackable video content that's relatable, entertaining, and informative. That is the trend, and TikTok is driving the trend. So as we get to the bottom of her quote, she said, it would be prudent for big media to work on understanding the social video landscape more broadly, but that in fact there is a time and a place for short form and a time and a place for longer form. She also notes in regards to Shorts on our podcast, if it's easy and seamless for viewers to watch Shorts on CTV might actually see solid consumer adoption. So in addition, another way that we expect YouTube to change is that they're going to double down on live stream shopping. Well, the world of QVC is back. We know that this has become extremely popular in the Asia markets. YouTube apparently is a top destination for viewing live video content, cited by 52% of social video viewers 16 and older. Interestingly enough, they had a beauty event with exclusive products, so anything that can bring exclusivity into the mix is fantastic to bring onto your platform. And then some other elements to change would be the area of creators. They are the centerpiece of YouTube's growth efforts. So I have some pretty cool data here. Close to half of consumers that were surveyed said that they watch influencer videos at least weekly. That's going to rise to about 52%. That's the respondents group is a very valuable demographic right there, that 13 to 34-year-old age group. Some other data that we see here from Hub Research cites that more than 2/3 of teens and adults could recall the names of specific specific brands highlighted by an influencer. So brand recognition is incredible. And keep in mind that some of those respondents don't have spending power. So to follow this, of those who could, 86% said that they had purchased or considered purchasing a product endorsed by a YouTube influencer. If I could pull you all in the chat, I would love to hear if you all have actually bought anything from a YouTube influencer. So maybe we'll have that in the Q&A. So, as for up to the minute information, as of this morning in our marketing and advertising briefing, our second story, if you've all seen this, was in regards to YouTube and TikTok. And so to incorporate the opportunities for creators and shorts, as of today, as of this morning, one of the stories said that shorts will share 45% of its income with creators. It's YouTube's biggest move yet to respond to the threat posted by TikTok. So giving a lot of revenue to creators to be specifically focused on content for YouTube. So that is the takeaway that I will leave you in regards to this battle between YouTube and TikTok. And we're going to get into our last section here, our last focus for video trends to watch and predictions for the remainder of 2022. Well, the first trend that we'll talk about is that the streaming market continues to get more and more crowded. So I was just talking about earlier that I have 4 services in my household. Well, I would ask you to guess, how many services do you think there are globally? Well, according to data that I saw from Flickst, there are more than 200 global streaming services. That is massive. And guess what? It's going to continue to grow. So the only natural next step is that the media conglomerates are going to consolidate some of their streaming assets. So we've already seen this already with, an example would be NBC Universal. When its Peacock service absorbed the WWE network. Streaming services are just going to have to combine to simplify the user experience and also be more beneficial to advertisers. And we also see that the average number of SVOD services used by internet users in North America now is 8.8, according to this data from Q2 of last year. I'll bring back another quote from Ross Benesch. This is in regards to the Discovery and the HBO combination. Ross on our podcast last month said when they announced that the two companies would merge, it only made sense that their streaming services would too. There's too many streaming services out there. So simplifying it for the consumer made a lot of sense. So, this can also be beneficial to a service that maybe doesn't have as many users. Marrying that service with another one that has a lot more content and a lot more eyeballs at the moment can only be beneficial, but can also help those companies to drive higher subscription fees due to more content. And in addition, yesterday's marketing and advertising briefing also had some information on streaming, and this was in regards to the consolidation, potentially, of Disney looking to gain full ownership of Hulu. So here at Insider Intelligence, we are on these topics every single day. So as you see, yesterday's briefing as well as today's provided a lot of great content on this space. So I encourage you to take a read if you haven't seen that yet. The second trend for 2022 is really around retransmission fees and how this is trickling down now to the consumer and causing a lot of frustration. So these retransmission fees and revenues are growing. They were at about $8 billion in 2016. Now they're at about $12 billion. And the prediction here is that these rising costs are going to just create higher bills for consumers, causing people eventually to perhaps flee these services, more cord cutting happening, because it's become frustrating for consumers to lose access to their favorite TV stations, which again could increase someone's odds of cutting the cord. So again, we will continue to look for that, but the big takeaway there is that that's going to provide less reach for TV advertisers if the battles become so much that the stations and the programs that people want to watch are not available to them. And our third trend to round this section out is in regards to CTV, the big growth area for this year that we're seeing. Advertisers are continuing to flock to CTV. Here is some very recent data that we have from this month from eMarketer on connected TV users by device. So at this point, about 2/3 of the US population are CTV users with a few 100 million CTV devices in circulation. So this is now becoming really big business. to control the interface that people are relying on for streaming. So it's likely that you all have more than one CTV device in your house. I have two, and that's because I live in an apartment. But if you have a house, you probably have more rooms with TVs. I probably would if I also had more rooms. So the big prediction is that more companies are going to build CTV operating systems. We are seeing that most TV makers at this point have outsourced the operating systems to companies like Amazon and Roku and Google. But given that there's a sense that this could be a big revenue opportunity, other companies like Samsung, LG, Vizio, well, they've built their own systems right now. So we're going to have to see how this market will continue to grow, as well as the ad revenues in this space. So some key takeaways that I want to leave you with for today's session is that traditional TV definitely continues to be an important part of the media mix, with a significant share of dollars still flowing there. The digital ad market has continued to be resilient to a lot of the inflation and supply chain issues. In addition, connected TV is a major area that is leading the growth and also changing consumption patterns. YouTube is going to have a lot of great opportunities around areas around creators, influencers, shorts. But we just have to think about how they are going to fend off other competitors in the market, TikTok being the big one right now, but who knows who else will come into the mix. Consolidation definitely being inevitable in the streaming market as more services pop up. So really thinking about how that will all come together moving forward, what that consolidation will look like, and ultimately, will it mirror the bundles that we know of from traditional TV? So before I leave you, I'm just going to give you a heads up on some content that we actually have coming out in the next few weeks even, all along the topics that we talked about today. We have some reports here coming up on advanced TV, global OTT and subscription OTT video viewers. We also have a connected TV advertising forecast coming out soon, subscription video revenues forecast, a time spent with media report, a digital audio forecast, and lastly, a social video advertising forecast. So I will leave you all with a thank you. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you, or send me a note. I'm also going to give a big shout out to my coworker, Andrew Worth, who is Cox Media's Senior Account Manager here at Insider Intelligence. And for those of you on the call from Cox, he's happy to help with any questions that you all have. And with that, Allison, I'm going to pass it back to you for any Q&A that's come in.
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you, Marissa. All right, so we do have a few minutes for some questions, and we did receive quite a few from many of you when you registered for this session. So we will start with those, but if you have a question you'd like to ask Marissa that you haven't already submitted, go ahead and put it in the question box on your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can. If we can't get to them all, Marissa has graciously agreed to answer those for us with Andrew's help, and we'll publish a blog article about that in a few days. So we'll get to as many as we can. All right, first one, Marissa. Any thoughts on what the future of streaming advertising looks like as the devices people use change from televisions, tablets, and phones to potentially virtual reality, mixed reality, and augmented reality devices?
Thank you so much for that question. I love that question, and I'm so glad that person submitted that to us in advance and is thinking about that, because for a large part, I feel like, of the beginning of 2022, a big topic of conversation was the metaverse and how that was really going to change advertising and marketing and what the opportunities will be. I've actually spoken with a lot of people as part of my Industry Voices series on what their brands were doing in the metaverse and were they a part of it and what opportunities do they see there. But in regards to just thinking about VR, MR, AR, all these different terms here, the world of just a different type of reality is really interesting to a lot of people. And I think at this point, there's a core audience of gamers that have really been open to seeing brands participate in their world. I guess a key point about that is just making sure that the brand is in an area that's actually aligning with the content or the games that are being played. So we've seen a number of paid partnerships, and I jotted down a few for you all today that I thought were pretty cool. paid partnerships. One in particular was the Gucci Garden Experience. This was on Roblox, where users could explore a different type of dreamy landscape. They could buy Gucci bags and Gucci products. So that actually did really, really well because it made sense in regards to the brand with the positioning on Roblox specifically. On Industry Voices, I spoke with Asmita Dubey, who is the Chief Marketing and Digital Officer earlier this year at L'Oreal. She gave a great example of NYX Professional Makeup, who was sponsoring an esports team, and how they participated in Crypto Fashion Week. So it really was where their audience is and what the opportunity was for them to be a part of it in a different way in which they may not have ever done that before. I think another factor in this is almost like what is available to the consumer. So we know that with augmented reality specifically, that's mostly happening on the mobile phone. And almost everybody has access to a mobile phone. But when you get into the areas of virtual reality, that's often bringing on another expense to the consumer to have access to those headsets, which many people don't have access to at this point. So it really depends on, I guess, what the brand is looking for and what the opportunity is in terms of the reach that you want, or maybe it's a very targeted plan to get in front of a specific audience that has those devices, or if it's more on a mass level at scale, using augmented reality to get in front of a consumer that already has that device to interact with you.
Very cool. I said this to Marissa earlier, VR, Meta, MR, all those R's are something that I'm way over my head right now, but very excited to learning more about as we're all kind of thrust into that world in the future.
Yeah. I will also say we did a great report earlier this year on the metaverse and woven many different industries. So if you're thinking about clients specifically within different industries, we have a whole host of content. I have actually hosted a video called Insider Quick Take, which we did one on the metaverse specifically. So there's a lot of great content that we have in that as a follow-up.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next question. It would be great to provide a general definition around what is OTT. I think we got that,
Yep.
But there's so much confusion around it in the marketplace. So if you could expand on that a little bit, you know, are there any overlap of OTT or things like AVOD? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think really just our general definition on OTT is how we defined it at the beginning of the presentation. Video that's delivered independently of traditional pay TV service or regardless of the device. So it's anything that is content beyond what you're seeing for traditional pay TV.
Thank you.
And TV was that definition of that we had the first definition of TV like we knew it growing up.
Yeah. So based on the current industry trends and data, what would you say is the most important strategic priority for ad agencies heading into 2023?
That's a good question. Yeah, I know we have a lot of agency folk on the line today, and I think it's dependent on who the client is for the agency and what their strategic priorities are. Overall, in terms of the content that we had today with video in particular, we are moving from roughly a 30-second world to an 8-second world in some cases. So thinking about the audience you want to get in front of, if it is that younger audience that is taking advantage of those shorter, quicker messages, but also thinking about how that process will change within the agency. We've been working off of a 30-second world for many, many years, and this 8-second world is very new. So how will that also change in terms of internal processes for the agency when you think about ideation and creation and process management, and also working with your clients to manage expectations appropriately for those processes. But I guess bringing those together internally first and then communicating that externally to clients is going to be a big priority for agencies moving forward.
Yeah, and tricky too, I'm sure. 8 seconds is not a lot of time to put a message out there.
No, do you remember when Vine came out into the market? I mean, I think people just couldn't believe that like anything could be communicated in such a short amount of time.
I know, but it can. It can. Are there any particular industries or business segments? I mean, we talked through a few throughout the presentation, but are there any that stand out as potential opportunities or key streaming audiences?
Yeah, so we know that at least on the advertising front, and often advertising wants to get in front of consumers that can take an action. So media companies have become a key advertiser of finance, health, and retail. So these are definitely potential audiences to get in front of, because we know that the dollars are there as well from the advertising standpoint.
Thank you. All right. I would imagine with any anything like this, like with streaming, any kind of new evolving technology, any sort of kind of disruptive technology, even though a lot of this has been around for a while, are there generational differences in terms of how people are either subscribing to some of these OTT platforms or subscription services, things like that? What's eMarketer or Insider Intelligence seeing in terms of a generational audience perspective?
Well, as you can imagine, the more traditional formats are more popular with older demographics. So our data really represents 65 and up when we look at that boomer generation. So the data that we have for most recently in terms of usage by generation shows that there are 55 million US adults over 65 years old, which is the largest segment of TV viewers. And those people are TV consumers. There's also 24 million from this demographic watching CTV and 30 million digital video viewers. So compare that 55 million for traditional to 24 and 30 million for more of the digital format. So it really is heavily focused towards traditional at this point with that demographic.
And then I think we probably have time for maybe one or two more questions. What is your experience on different length video spots? You talked a little bit about 8-second, but what seems to be more effective? Is it 10, 15, 30? Does it really kind of depend? Can you dig into that just a little bit more?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So yeah, it is interesting because we were even just talking about 8 seconds, like let alone 15. 15 seems double the length, right? That's long. But generally, longer ads, according to our team here, are more effective at driving awareness or recall. So keep in mind also, we talked a little bit about brand recall and how on YouTube influencers were really helping to boost that. So the longer, the better which is almost textbook from what we all learned if you went to school for advertising or media. But in general, in terms of like bang for your buck, shorter ads could potentially be better. But again, it's almost like a weighing the cost. So if you have a spot already that's 30 seconds that you're using on broadcast, can you use that same spot in a digital format? There may be a higher CPM for the digital buy, but you wouldn't have the cost of recreating the ad or splicing it or just having to reorganize it in whatever way to meet a shorter format for the digital opportunity. So that's one point of view right there. But a lot of TV research at this point shows that 15-second ads, I have some data here, are roughly 75% as effective as 30-second spots. And obviously, they're half the cost, but 15 seconds are not as common on TV. It's more or less rounding out at the 30-second as the most common. And 60-second spots have become less common these days. And of course, they are more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, when we're just putting together ads for campaigns just to promote Cox Media, kind of preaching or doing what we preach, we often are looking at that 30-second spot and building the script and building the concept. We're like, what will this look like as a 15? What will this look like as an 8? What will it look like as a 6? And how can we cut it up and make sure that there's a good through line through all of those ads. So, okay, I think we're running out of time. Marissa, thank you so much for all of this incredible content. It was so informative, and the question box is lighting up. So I know we have a handful or more than a handful to send your way and Andrew's way to help us kind of get all of these answered. But as a quick reminder for everyone on the call, a recording of our webinar today will be emailed to you, and we'll be back later this year with another guest expert and more great content. So we hope you'll be able to join us again then. In the meantime, check out our blog for articles, ebooks, and recordings of some of our previous Ask the Experts webinars. The link was there on your screen. It's coxmedia.com/insights. And as always, for any additional questions regarding today's content, you can always contact your Cox Media consultant. If you're not a current customer of Cox Media, just visit coxmedia.com to get connected with one of our media experts, and we'd be happy to tell you more. So thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. And one last time, Marissa, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all as well. Thanks for being here, and thanks for hosting me.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.